Imagine this. You just got paid. You check your bank account and for the first time in a while the number looks okay. Not great, but okay. You have enough to cover rent, groceries, and maybe, finally, make a dent in that credit card balance you have been carrying around for the past 8 months. So you log in. You make the payment. You feel good about yourself. Responsible. Smart. Like you are getting ahead. And then, 2 weeks later, something unexpected comes up. Car repair. A medical bill. An appliance that decides now is the perfect time to stop working. And because you put all that extra money toward the credit card, your bank account is thin. So you pull out the card again. And just like that, you are back where you started. If that story sounds familiar, you are not alone. Millions of people live in that exact cycle month after month, year after year. They pay down debt, something happens, and the debt comes back. They work harder, earn more, but somehow the balance never really disappears. It just moves around. And here is the thing most people never find out. There is a mathematical reason this keeps happening. A built-in feature of how debt works, specifically how interest is calculated, that makes it incredibly hard to get out once you are in. It is not a conspiracy. It is not a scam in the illegal sense. But it is a rule. A banking rule that almost nobody explains to you. And once you understand it, you will look at every loan, every credit card, and every monthly payment statement in a completely different way. Today, we are going to break that rule down. Simply. Step by step. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why paying the minimum keeps you stuck, how interest quietly eats your money, and what you can actually do about it. Let's start from the very beginning. Most of us grow up believing that debt is pretty simple. You borrow money, you pay it back, and eventually it is gone. The bigger the payment you make each month, the faster it disappears. Seems logical, right? And that is exactly what banks count on you thinking. Here is what actually happens when you have a debt, let us say a credit card balance of $2,000 with an interest rate of 20% per year. You get your statement. Shows you the minimum payment. Maybe it is $50. Maybe $60. You pay it. You feel like you made progress. The balance goes down a little. Life continues. But here is what the statement does not show you clearly. Of those $50 or $60 you just paid, a significant chunk of it did not go toward your actual debt at all. It went toward interest. It went to the bank. As a fee. As the price of borrowing. And only a small portion, sometimes shockingly small, actually reduced what you owe. This is the first thing that surprises most people when they really sit down and look at it. They think they are paying off debt. But for months, sometimes years, they are mostly just paying to keep the debt alive. So why does this happen? Why is so much of your payment going to interest and so little to the actual balance? The answer lies in something called amortization. And while that word sounds complicated, the idea behind it is actually very simple once you see it in action. Picture a bucket of water. That bucket is your debt. Every month, the sun shines on the bucket and some of the water evaporates. That evaporation is the interest. It is the cost that quietly disappears from your pocket automatically before anything else happens. When you make a payment, you are pouring water into the bucket. But here is the key. Before any of that water you are adding actually raises the level of your savings, the bucket has to compensate for however much evaporates first. So if the sun evaporated a lot of water, meaning your interest charge was high, most of your payment just refills what was lost. Only the leftover amount actually reduces the size of the bucket itself. And here is the cruel twist. The bigger the bucket, meaning the larger your debt, the more water evaporates each month. Which means more of your payment goes to refilling the evaporation and less goes to actually shrinking the bucket. This is not a metaphor. This is literally how the math works. Let us use a real example. Suppose you owe $2,000 on a credit card at 20% annual interest. 20% of $2,000 is $400 a year in interest. Divide that by 12 months and you are being charged roughly $33 in interest every single month just for having that balance. Now say your minimum payment is $50. You pay $50, but 33 of that immediately goes to interest. That leaves only $17 that actually chips away at your $2,000 balance. $17 on a $2,000 debt with a $50 payment. That rate, imagine how long it takes to pay off that balance. Not months. We are talking about years. And the total amount you end up paying when you add up all those interest charges along the way can end up being nearly double what you originally borrowed. That is the trap. And most people do not see it because nobody breaks it down this clearly. Now let us talk about minimum payments specifically because this is where the psychological manipulation gets really interesting. Banks are legally required to tell you what your minimum payment is, and they calculate it in a very specific way, usually as a small percentage of your outstanding balance or a flat fee, whichever is higher. The thing is, that minimum payment number is designed to keep you comfortable. It is small enough that you can afford it. Small enough that it does not feel like a burden. But it is also perfectly calibrated to keep you in debt for as long as mathematically possible while still technically having you make progress. It is like being given a tiny spoon to empty a swimming pool. You are technically making progress, but you will be there for a very, very long time. And here is the psychological part. When people see that minimum payment number, something happens in the brain. Researchers who study financial behavior have found that the minimum payment acts as what they call an anchor. Gives your brain a reference point. And once you have that reference point, you tend to make decisions relative to it. So instead of asking yourself, what is the smartest amount to pay this month, you unconsciously compare it to the minimum. And anything above the minimum feels like you are already doing well. You are paying more than required. You are being responsible. But that feeling of responsibility is actually costing you money. Because what the math demands, and what your instinct does not naturally push you toward, is paying as much as you possibly can as fast as you possibly can to outrun the interest before it compounds. Let us talk about compounding. Because this is where things really start to get interesting. You have probably heard the phrase, let your money work for you. That is the promise of investing. You put money in and over time the returns compound, meaning you earn returns on your returns. The longer you leave it, the faster it grows. It is genuinely one of the most powerful forces in personal finance. But compounding works exactly the same way in reverse when you are on the wrong side of it. When you carry a balance on a credit card or a loan, the interest compounds. That means if you do not pay off the interest charges each month, they get added to your balance. And next month, you are being charged interest on a larger amount, including the interest from last month. Interest on interest. Debt growing on top of debt. Quietly. Automatically. Every single month. Let us imagine two people. Both have a $5,000 credit card debt at 18% interest. Person A pays only the minimum payment each month. Let us say it works out to around $100. Over time, as the balance slowly shrinks, the minimum payment shrinks too. Takes them almost 30 years to pay off that debt. And by the time they are done, they have paid more than $13,000 in total. On a $5,000 debt, Person B decides to pay a fixed amount of $200 every month, double the minimum, no matter what. They pay off the same debt in about 2.5 years. And their total cost? About $6,200. Same starting point. Same interest rate. The only difference was the size of the monthly payment. Person A paid more than $13,000. Person B paid just over $6,000. The gap between them, almost $7,000, did not go toward reducing debt. That went straight to the bank as the pure cost of time, of going slowly, of making minimum payments. Now here is something worth pausing on. Most people in Person A's situation are not lazy. They are not irresponsible. Many of them are working hard, juggling bills, trying to keep everything together. But without understanding the math, without seeing clearly what the minimum payment is actually costing them, they make the understandable choice of keeping the payment manageable. And that reasonable, understandable choice ends up costing them $7,000. Now here is where we need to talk about psychology. 'Cause understanding the math is one thing. But if understanding math was enough, everyone who knew about compounding would be debt-free. And that is clearly not the case. The reason is that our brains are not wired to naturally feel the cost of slow, invisible, long-term processes. We are wired for the opposite. We respond to immediate discomfort. We respond to visible, concrete, right-now problems. The abstract and the distant barely register. When you are looking at a monthly statement, your brain is calculating something like this. How much pain can I avoid right now while still technically handling my obligations? The minimum payment is the answer to that question. It is the path of least immediate discomfort. But the cost of compound interest does not feel painful. It is invisible. It accumulates in the background over months and years. By the time it becomes undeniable, you have already paid thousands of dollars you did not have to. Behavioral economists call this present bias. The tendency to weight immediate experiences, costs, benefits, discomfort, far more heavily than future ones, even when the future cost is objectively much larger. Here is a simple example of present bias in everyday life. Most people would rather receive $100 today than $110 next month. Even though waiting 1 month for $10 extra is an incredibly good return, the pull of right now is stronger. With debt, present bias works against you in a very specific way. Paying more now, reducing the enjoyment money you have available this month, feels like a real and immediate sacrifice. But the thousands of dollars you will save in interest over the next several years? That feels abstract, theoretical, far away. So the brain defaults to the minimum. And the bank, whether by design or by coincidence, has built a system that perfectly exploits that bias. There is another psychological layer worth discussing here, and it has to do with how debt makes people feel emotionally, not just financially. For a lot of people, carrying debt is a source of low-grade shame. It is not something you talk about at dinner. It is not something you bring up with friends. It sits quietly in the background, a constant reminder that you are not where you want to be financially. And shame, it turns out, makes it harder to deal with the problem clearly. When something feels shameful, people tend to avoid looking at it directly. They avoid calculating the true cost. They avoid reading the fine print. They pay the minimum and move on because spending more time thinking about the debt means spending more time feeling bad. This avoidance is completely understandable as a human response. But it is also financially disastrous. Because the less clearly you see the debt, the less urgency you feel to attack it aggressively, and the more the compounding quietly works against you. This is why financial literacy is not just about knowing numbers. It is about developing the emotional capacity to face uncomfortable financial realities directly without flinching, so that you can make clear-headed decisions based on math instead of feelings. Knowing the truth might sting, but staying in the dark is what really costs you. Here is a way to think about all of this that might make it feel even more real. In most countries, you pay income tax on the money you earn. You know about it. You plan for it. You account for it. But there is another tax most people pay that never shows up with that name on any document. It is the tax of financial illiteracy. Cost of not understanding how interest works. Cost of making minimum payments. Cost of keeping money in a savings account earning 1% while carrying credit card debt at 20%. This tax does not come from the government. It comes from the system. From the gap between what financial institutions understand about money and what most regular people were never taught. And unlike income tax, this one is entirely optional. Once you understand the rules of the game, you can stop paying it. Let us talk about what that actually looks like in practice. Okay, so we understand the problem. Interest compounds. Minimum payments barely move the needle. Our brains are wired to choose short-term comfort over long-term savings. The system is designed in a way that keeps a lot of people stuck. Now let us talk about what to actually do about it. And I want to keep this simple because the whole point is that this does not have to be complicated. Step 1. See the real number. Most people never sit down and calculate the true cost of their debt. Not the balance, the total cost. Take your interest rate, look up a debt payoff calculator online, there are free ones everywhere, and input your balance, your rate, and your minimum payment. Then look at what it says. How long will it take to pay off? How much total will you pay? That number will probably shock you. And that shock is actually useful, because your brain needs to feel the real cost viscerally in order to generate the motivation to act. Abstract knowledge that interest is bad does not move people. Concrete knowledge that you are about to pay $12,000 on a $4,000 debt? That tends to create urgency. Step 2. Make debt your primary financial enemy, not a background inconvenience. There is a mental shift that has to happen here. As long as debt feels like something you are managing, paying the minimum, keeping up, staying afloat, it will stay. You have to decide to treat it as something you are at war with. Something to be eliminated as fast as humanly possible. This does not mean destroying your quality of life. It means reconsidering every discretionary expense through the lens of, is this worth more than the interest I am paying every day on my debt? Sometimes the answer is yes. Going to a friend's birthday dinner is worth it. But it also means being honest about the expenses where the answer is actually no. The subscription you forgot about, the eating out habit that is costing more than you realize, the purchase you made because it was on sale even though you did not really need it. Step 3. Use the avalanche or snowball method. If you have multiple debts, a credit card, a car loan, a personal loan, there are 2 popular strategies for paying them down efficiently. The debt avalanche method says, list all your debts and pay the minimum on everything except the one with the highest interest rate. Throw every extra dollar at that highest rate debt first. Once it is gone, take that freed up payment and attack the next highest rate. And so on. Mathematically, this is the fastest way to get out of debt. You eliminate the most expensive debt first, which reduces the total interest you pay over time. The debt snowball method takes a slightly different approach. Instead of targeting the highest interest rate first, you target the smallest balance. You pay off the smallest debt first, get a quick win, feel the momentum, and use that psychological energy to attack the next one. This is less mathematically efficient. But for many people, the psychological win of seeing a debt fully eliminated, going to zero, creates enough motivation to stay on the plan. And staying on the plan matters more than the mathematically perfect strategy you abandon after 3 months. Neither method is wrong. Pick the one that will actually keep you going. Step 4. Do not save while carrying high-interest debt. This one feels counterintuitive to a lot of people. We are told to save. We are told an emergency fund is important. We are told to invest early. All of that is true. But there is a specific situation where saving is actually costing you money. If you have money sitting in a savings account earning 2% interest, and you are simultaneously carrying credit card debt at 20% interest, you are losing 18% per year on that money. You are effectively paying the bank to hold money you could be using to eliminate a much more expensive obligation. The exception to this is a small emergency fund, maybe $1,000, specifically so that when unexpected expenses hit, you do not immediately have to go right back to the credit card. That small buffer breaks the cycle of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But beyond that buffer, in most cases, the highest return investment you can make is paying off high-interest debt. No stock market return, no savings account, nothing that is reliably available to regular people will match the guaranteed return of eliminating a 20% interest rate. Step 5. Negotiate. This step is underused and underappreciated. A lot of people do not realize that the interest rates on their debts are sometimes negotiable. If you have been a long-time customer of a bank, if you have a history of making payments, if you have improved your credit score, you can call and ask for a lower rate. The worst they can say is no. But many people who ask actually get a reduction. Similarly, balance transfer credit cards with 0% introductory rates can be a powerful tool. If you have good credit, you can sometimes move a high-interest balance to a 0% card for 12 to 18 months. Every payment you make during that window goes entirely to principal. No interest eating into it. This does not solve the problem by itself. You still have to actually pay down the balance aggressively during that window. But it can buy you time and save significant money if used correctly. Let me leave you with something that goes beyond the practical steps. Because there is a bigger idea underneath all of this, and I think it is worth saying out loud. The reason most people are not taught how interest and compounding really work is not necessarily because someone is trying to hurt them. It is more mundane than that. Financial literacy simply is not a priority in most school systems. We learn history, literature, mathematics, science. But almost nobody teaches a class on how a credit card actually works, or why minimum payments are structured the way they are, or what compounding interest actually means over a 30-year timeline. So people enter adulthood carrying the general impression that debt is normal, manageable, something everyone has, and that as long as you keep up with payments, you are basically fine. And the system, the banks, the credit card companies, the lending industry benefits from that impression. Not because they are evil, but because they are businesses, and the longer you carry a balance, the more money they make. That is just how the math works from their side of the table. Understanding this is not about anger or blame. It is about clarity. Once you see how the game is structured, you can make conscious choices about how to play it, rather than unconscious choices that happen to benefit the institution on the other side of your account. And here is something genuinely encouraging. The same mathematical force that works against you when you are in debt, compounding, becomes your most powerful ally the moment you flip to the other side. People who get out of debt and start investing are not just neutralizing a negative. They are building momentum in the opposite direction. Every month their investment grows, that growth generates more growth. The same exponential curve that was crushing them in debt starts lifting them in wealth. The distance between those two experiences, being on the wrong side of compounding versus the right side, is mostly knowledge. It is understanding the rule. And now you understand it. So here is the question I want to leave you with. If you looked at every debt you are carrying right now, every balance, every loan, every line of credit, and you truly calculated the full cost of paying only the minimum until it was gone, what number would you see? And what would that number make you want to do differently starting this month? You do not have to change everything overnight. But one decision, 1 month where you pay more than the minimum, one balance you attack with real intention, starts to break the cycle. And once the cycle breaks, things move faster than most people expect. Money rewards clarity. And today you got a little more of it. This video helped you see something in a new way. Share it with someone you think needs to hear it. The best financial advice we can give each other is simply helping people see the rules of the game they are already playing. See you in the next one.